Hello, sixth graders. The last couple days we have been talking about how to design a controlled experiment. This tends to be something that is very challenging for students to learn, so I figured if I made this instruction for what we did in class, that way you could rewatch it and learn the material hopefully a little bit better. The first part in designing an experiment we have talked about is to ask a question and form a hypothesis. And when you do that, you should be able to, if the question is written well and if the hypothesis is written well, you should be able to pick out both the independent variable, which is the manipulated variable. It is the one variable that I, the scientist, am going to change. You should also be able to pick out of the question the dependent variable. The dependent variable is the variable that is going to change as a result. So the dependent variable is the one that we are going to measure at the end and collect data with. Controlled variables are also important in an experiment, but they are not going to be found within the question and the hypothesis. So we are only going to focus today on the independent and the dependent variables. Let's look at question 1. So in question 1, it says, does sunlight affect plant growth? We discussed this is a scientific question. It can be experimented with. The data can be measured. It is not opinion-based. This is definitely an experiment that we could do. So within it, you should be able to find the independent and dependent variable. So for question, does sunlight affect plant growth? What is it that I, the scientist, am going to change in this experiment? I'm probably going to set up the experiment where I have two of the same type of plant. I'm going to put one in sunlight and one not in sunlight and give it the same amount of water, give it the same type and amount of soil, all those things. So what I am going to change when I set up the experiment is the amount of sunlight. So I'm going to highlight sunlight in the question, and then in the hypothesis, you can also see amount of sunlight is there as well. So those are well written because you can see the independent variable in both of those. Now, as the dependent variable is the one that is measured as a result, what do I think the sunlight will change? I think the sunlight is going to change the plant growth. So my dependent variable would be how much the plant grows. That is what I'm going to measure as my result. So we talked in class about I change the independent variable. So what am I changing? I am changing the amount of sunlight. Remember, with an independent variable, I change the independent variable. The independent variable is the cause. It causes a change in the dependent. So I change the amount of sunlight. The amount of sunlight changes the plant growth. It would not make sense to say it the other way around. I don't change the plant growth, and then the plant growth changes the amount of sunlight. So whatever it is that I change is the independent variable. If you look at the second example, you have, does blood attract sharks? Obviously, there is an experimentation we could do with this, and also not hurt any living things in the process. But what we're going to do in this experiment is we are going to change the amount of blood that I put in the water. That is what I am going to change in the experiment. And then what I'm going to measure as a result is the number of sharks that it attracts. So what I'm going to write down here then, again, is the independent variable is the amount of blood, and the dependent variable, what I will measure as a result, I will count and measure the number of sharks. Again, if we read it as I change the amount of blood changes the number of sharks. So I being the independent variable. When you write a good hypothesis, you can see after the if is where you will find the independent variable. So if I change this, then my prediction is that it will grow more because, and then I need to give a reason. So again, in this number 2, if I increase the amount of blood, that's the end. If I change the independent variable, then the dependent variable will change because, and then I give my reason. So that is how you write a correct scientific hypothesis as well. We no longer are going to write the I believe statements. We will write it as an if, then, because statement. I hope this helped. I want to encourage you to continue practicing with the quizzes that I assigned. And also you can do the QA that is linked to Friday's calendar.